Thanks, Chair. Just want to tag on to observations made and then briefly try to see whether we can establish or provide some ethical compass out of this conflict or crisis. So basically, this indeed is a propitious occasion for the Academy of the Sciences of the Holy See, not only to help widen the scope of reference of the conversation about how to prevent and mitigate food and humanitarian crisis with science and policy formation, but it's also to invite the Holy See to bring a moral authority or ethical teaching for food justice in the post-COVID recovery world, ridden with conflict and displacement of peoples, as we've seen in Sudan and other parts of the well, no? Okay. So that being the case, I just like to look for the question of hunger and access to food. It's a truly moral issue, since it is about the lives of human persons, as the past three popes have variously observed. And so I just, with reference to this small, simple method, see, judge, and act, I just like to go through this with hope of presenting something at the end. So we want to just see briefly the situation, which has been amply presented in all the past speakers, the situation of hunger in the world. And then go into a little bit of analysis or briefly overview of that, and then try to propose some solution out of it. So if we try to look at the situation, a lot of it have been presented with graphs and all of that. There's no lack of information about malnutrition, hunger, and starvation through reports, figures, statistics by UN agencies like Rome's own Food and Agriculture Organization, IFAD, WFP, by national governments, NGOs, and all of that. We have abundance of information about the challenges of food in the world. So they illustrate the observations of FAO's experts that global hunger has been on the rise for several years already. That in 2019, the number of undernourished people in the world had increased by 60 million in relationship with 2014. And this in spite of the increase in food production. So the fear is that even discounting the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, this trend will result in about 840 million people, hungry people, by the year 2030. As it were, making or putting to kind of ridicule the UN Sustainable Goal number 2 that aims at zero hunger by this same date. So the goal of statistics is not, as we've seen so far from all the information given, I would say that the goal of all of this statistics is not simply to amass information for us or to satisfy our curiosity, but it is more to become painfully aware and to turn what is happening into our own personal suffering, compassion, and try to discover a way out of this crisis. So it's not just information sharing. Information is to lead us, to awaken within us a sense of compassion and care for everything that is happening. And so what we do with the situation then, I like to refer to 3 C's as the key drivers. They've already been mentioned in this hall for food scarcity and the hunger in the world. So the combined 3 C's, so that's a conflict, COVID-19, and climate change, with all the complications that arise from them. But as Pope Francis has observed on the occasion of the World Food Day in 2020, for humanity, hunger is not only a tragedy, but it is also shameful. In fact, as he wrote, for hunger is criminal, since food is an inalienable right. His predecessor, Pope Benedict XVI, illustrated this point by saying that the right to food like the right to water, has an important place within the pursuit of other rights, beginning with the fundamental right to life. It is therefore necessary to cultivate a public conscience that considers food and access to water as universal rights of all human beings, without distinction or discrimination. So Pope Benedict then went on further to say, the elimination then of world hunger has also in the global era became also a requirement for safeguarding peace and stability. Indeed, it was his Paul who said that development is the new name of peace, but development requires peace. It's the new name, but there cannot be development of any kind without a peaceful situation or peaceful conduct of anything. And so when this is the case, it brings us to an attempt. So what can we suggest? What kind of solution can we propose for this if this is the situation of hunger is actually a truly human situation that requires challenges, and then, as the popes have said, we need to consider that this is a question of right. So some suggestions that I would like to throw out as a quest for ethical compass out of the crisis, could be this, that when in 2015, there was here in Italy a World Food Expo in Milan, it was interesting the type of topic or slogan which was adopted for this. That expo sought for a change in lifestyle through the collective efforts of moral and spiritual energies to overcome hunger. But the greatest contribution, from my point of view, to this challenge of food and hunger in the world is the title that was proposed. This Food Expo was held under the title, One Human Family, Food for All. And so we decided to do something, play around that title, and simply say, fine, if we convert the first part, one human family, into a clause that expresses the precondition for what follows, then we'll end up saying, when we live as one human family, there will be food for all. So the title had been, One Human Family, Food for All. And we say, let's convert that one human family into a clause. When we live as one human family, there will indeed be food for all. And that became the basis of the intervention that came from us. And that meant that this is an invitation to consider the whole question of global hunger as a human issue. And considering that as a human issue makes it also an ethical issue that we need to deal with. So, and like every great human issue, global hunger immediately becomes a moral and ethical issue. It involves the exercise of human freedom. We are free to show disinterest and indifference. We are free to exercise goodwill. We are free also in the exercise of our creativity to consider the role of responsibility. So from the lessons then of the 2015 for the Expo in Milan, we may now identify two fundamental principles to inspire and guide action. That is the dignity of each human being and the common good. And in making decisions in the light of these principles, we are inevitably drawn towards action such as to support and expand the development of agricultural workers and respect their innate dignity, to support small producers and cooperatives that adopt less polluting and more inclusive means of production, to apply the new technologies available into the agricultural and fishing industries that help tilling and keeping the earth, and this means working the earth while we care for it. To implement a global system that respects our common home by allowing for the regeneration of resources and distributing the fruits of the resources equitably. And in fact, the principle then of common good is inextricably linked also with another principle, which is the universal destination of the goods of the earth. The goods of the earth is destined for all, none excluded. Based on this, then, we say, therefore, working under an integral ecology paradigm and common good, we may come up with the following as concrete ethical positions which come up with some action. Respecting people's dignity. This will lead us to reinforce local and global food supply chains, creating infrastructure, both physical and digital, to close the gap between small-scale farmers and food markets. By strengthening local farmers and food systems, it will be possible to cut greenhouse gas emissions in all phases of the food production cycle. Then, acting in solidarity would be able to elevate the needs of the most vulnerable communities, indigenous communities, etc., around the world, and bring them to the center of international policies discussion, as we call for, like the one foreseen for the UN Food Systems Summit, and to ensure that the preferential option for the poor is also kept. And then acting again in subsidiarity, this would enhance local and traditional knowledge to ensure better production and protection of biodiversity and promote the sustainable use of natural resources. In this regard, I'd like to recall that I think it was last year, FAO organized an event on learning from indigenous food, food production methods and practices, and that was a way of enhancing that. And so, respecting dignity, acting in solidarity, acting in subsidiarity, we come to act for the common good. And acting for the common good would invite us to reform the present-day technological and financial architecture to support this transformation of the food system, particularly today in the context of the pandemic, recovery, climate change, the conflicts and everything around us. They would enable us then to see about how we can respond to responsibilities and all, especially to work against over-financialization of food commodities, considering the interest and the gain more than the access to food for all. So this would also mean that we need to change our behavior regarding food waste, which is deplorable in the extreme, and then finally work towards mitigating the current global food crisis and consider this not as an impossibility, but consider this as a challenge that requires the propagation of the common good and the social ethical principle of global solidarity to promote a public conscience that guarantees the fundamental right to life and fundamental right to food for all. And we want to say when this is the case, we might make some headways in dealing with world hunger and food production. Thank you.